Ligamus, Lachis Pigasos, Nana Dite Sulachis Nocaius, La Yapani, Awinagris. Guixi, Nana Dite Yasha Ina Yaka, Lacha Iki, Awinagris. Tola Gafanu Fratnala, Sunukimaya Luknia. Digetluda genoeg jekinaya genoeg le digetluda jekinaya sa yak samiga wala x2 genoeg wala kola sa yak sami o matak kola yak genoeg la yak sami suma akus yikame sa iki suma new brothers na kosa suma Amyakidas Hag East Marino. Okay. So first dance that all these kids are going to do is the Namgis welcome dance for all you. So welcome everybody from the kids. Really fast pace. So next dance these awesome little girls are going to do is a Yuilinuch, professional ladies dance. So we got some really amazing little dancers at our school and just thought we'd like to share it with you. So, Kaya Kasla. Come here. Getting mixed up with that other one. Even to his question. How's it going? Good. Amen. So that song that we just sang comes from Fruipert, and lots of the little girls here and lots of people in the school are related to the hunts. And yeah, so thank you for inviting the Tlisa Aguilar School to come have a presentation. And the kids really love dancing, so it makes it easy to teach. And
Morning, everybody. Thomas and I are the teachers at the Isagilok School. We do our best at teaching these girls. It's a weekend and we had like 30 people signed up. But we do our best at teaching the kids what we know. Thomas and I know we're not that old. But anyway, so we do our best at teaching them the hand motions, what everything means, where the dances and songs come from. We get permission to use the dances that we use in the school. We have so many children from different tribes in our school, and we try to use songs from the different tribes, with permission, of course. So these are our students that travel with us. If we have performances or if someone asks us to share a song or a dance, these children are always with us. And they're our reason for living, and I'm really happy to be working in our school and sharing with all of you guys. Qila kastaukhla.
Good morning again. That was just absolutely beautiful. For those of you who weren't here this morning, my name is Tamara Goddard. I'm from the Sodu First Nation. So we're way up northeastern BC in Fort St. John, just outside of Fort St. John, hour and a half actually. Beautiful to have the dancers here this morning. I'm the daughter of Mavis Davis, granddaughter of Mavis Davis, daughter of Valerie Napoleon. And I thought it's interesting because I was thinking of that, my mother and her work with Indigenous law and translating cultural stories to Indigenous law recognized in the Canadian court systems. And as I was thinking of that, she called me right at that moment. So I was actually able to pick up the phone and she was listening along with the dancers. So that was really beautiful for me this morning. Thank you. It's wonderful to be back on these territories. I'd like to just go through the meeting procedures. There was draft meeting procedures that we reviewed in spring at the general meeting, and the procedures are up here behind me. I'll be chairing the meeting today, so you're supposed to speak when I recognize you. Thank you. I'll do my best to be as respectful as I can, understanding that I'm within your territory and doing my best to assist to facilitate the work that you have here to do today. The agenda's got a couple changes. Number 3, where it says Namgis businesses, is going to come prior to the opening comments by Chief and Council, and that's just because Keena's got to leave today to catch a flight and a ferry. Statements with Corey McIntosh. So we'll do the Namgis businesses, then the opening comments, then the audited financial statements. Then we'll have to do the approval of the meeting minutes from the last general meeting. And then also we'll be collecting feedback from the meeting procedures draft. Still looking for feedback on that to finalize that document. There will be questions as each presenter gives their presentation. As they're going along, they'd like to take your questions so that your questions are directed directly at what they're talking about. So it'll be nice, open, very relaxed. Okay, the rest story of the meeting procedures is when the presentations are happening, if you can speak just directly to that presentation, that will help us keep accurate notes and key themes and make sure that you're all being heard. If you miss asking a question and think of one after, if you could just write that down. Vanessa Mountain is here working with me today, and she'll take your additional comments and questions, and she'll keep track of those, and if we have time to answer or address them, we can come back to them at the members forum, which will happen right before lunch. We're asking, last time a lot of members felt they didn't get to ask questions, so we're trying to limit our speaking comments to about 5 minutes, and I'll do my best to respect yourselves as citizens of the Namgis Nation. To yield to the floor to calls for order by the chair. So if I'm bringing the meeting back, back to focus, that's just to try and keep everything on track so that Chief and Council can get all the information they need to you, and so that as many members can have a chance to speak as possible. Of course, to avoid disturbing proceedings. And of course, to respectfully listen to your fellow citizens and members when they're speaking. So we're going to move on to the presentation on Namgis businesses. We're going to hear first from Keena Hicken, and then we're going to hear from Corey McIntosh, and then we're going to hear from Chief Deborah Hanous. The purpose of these presentations is to look at what companies and businesses are doing in the activity report, how much they have made and how much we owe in respect of each business, how much has been transferred from these companies to the Namgis, and how the Namgis have spent that money. And that's Corey and Lynn's report. And then a formula and plan for how council will spend monies received from companies and businesses moving forward, and that's Chief Deborah Hanous. So we'll get Keena to come up with the first presentation. From Corey McIntosh and Lynn Anderson. They're here to explain how much money has been transferred from companies to Namgis and how Namgis has spent that money. So we can get Corey to come on up to the front. And Lynn. 1, 2.
Okay, thank you, and good morning. Gila Kesla, Nugwaum Kori. I have to thank the coaching I got just before. So just kind of as a continuation on from the presentation that Keena gave, now I'm going to take you through how the transfers from the different businesses came into the nation, and a little bit about how that money was spent. In addition, we're going to cover any other revenues that are economic development related, such as the tobacco sales, gas station, things that are reported in the nation's financial statements themselves. So the schedules included in the presentation are taken from the audited financial statements for the nation. Most of the businesses are operated as separate legal entities, which is the presentation that Keena took you through earlier. The information shown or included in the presentation is the nation's share of income or loss from those businesses, and any revenue and expenses that are directly related to the investments. So the first couple of slides deal with the Forest and Range Agreement monies. And this started in, I believe, the 2005 fiscal year and carried on for about 10 or 11 years. This schedule just shows the results for the first 5 years of the agreement, and then the next slide will go through the next 5 years. This is an agreement with the provincial government. They provide forest and range monies to the nation, and the nation has transferred the monies to various departments each year to be spent on different functions. Many of those are forestry related or capital related, such as capital construction, type expenditures. At the end of this presentation, I think Lynn's going to show a summary of the total forest and range dollars that have been received, and a bit of a breakdown of how those have been applied to different projects over the years. The end is that at the end of March 2015, there's still a little over $1.3 million remaining in the funds that haven't been spent or allocated. And I think the total that was received over the 10 or 11 years is between $6.6 and $6.7 million. I'm just going to back up one slide here. One thing to note is out of these dollars in the first year, $495,000 was taken and used to make a cash contribution to Orca Sand and Gravel. So, and this was part of a matching contribution. The federal government provided $495,000 that was used to invest in Orca Sand and Gravel, and the nation had to make an equal matching contribution of $495,000. The total of that is $990,000, just under $1 million, which forms part of what the nation has invested in Orca Sand and Gravel. So on here we see a bit of a 10-year summary of the expenditures. As I mentioned earlier, much of it was spent on forestry-related activities and capital projects, construction, including cabins at Mount Cain. There's also a significant transfer or contribution to, shows on here, CUDAS, but now known as Kutera Limited Partnership, and other economic development activities, and the transfer to the Orca Sand and Gravel. This slide just shows a bit more of a breakdown of the miscellaneous expenditures, items that are smaller than about 2% each in terms of the makeup of the overall expenditures of forest and range dollars. Okay, before I move on to the tobacco outlet, is there any questions related to forest and range agreement spending?
George Alfred. Yeah, I asked earlier. I'd like to know where the money went that came in from our agreement, and who decided how the money was going to be spent, and why it was done like that. Because it obviously never came to a meeting like this, because that money belongs to the members. Like I said before, it doesn't belong to the council, it doesn't belong to administration, it doesn't belong to this corporation. The profits, I'm talking about the company maybe, but the profits should have came here. Now, if it just got sunk into administration, what good did that do us? Nothing. I still got to get a soup line number when I go doctor in Canberra River, because they won't give you money for food. You know, I'd like to know, like, that money that came in from the forestry and all those things, or is that coming up later? I'd like to know what happened to the money that came in, profits and so forth. And there has to be rules, so it has to come here as the members own it. You know, the same thing. If Indian Affairs done it, we'd be in court right now. So I'd just like to know what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, if you're talking about the profits from Otley Resources, that's coming up. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, tobacco outlet program. This is a summary of revenues and expenditures that are reported in the nation's financial statements for the last 10 years from cigarette and tobacco sales. And you can see from the chart the net income or net profit from this business dropped in the 2008, 9, 10 years, and then has been relatively on an increase since that time. In those years, it seems that there was a lower gross margin, meaning the nation wasn't making as much on the sales of cigarette and tobacco products during that time. This can either be the result of incorrect pricing or issues related around inventory. And if the control of the inventory was such that inventory was going missing, that can have a big effect on the net income, of course. And steps have been taken in recent years, I know, to improve the security of the cigarette and tobacco products to try and prevent that. And in the last couple of years, the sales of the products have been moved down to the gas station as opposed to in the administration office. As far as transfers out of this program, there's been really two transfers of this net profit. One in 2006 that was related to the net loft and breakwater to help pay for some professional fees or professional services in that department. And then in 2014, a little over $387,000 was transferred from the net profits over the years to help pay for Namgis House. And the other portion of Namgis House was funded from a transfer to do with Otley revenues, which will be coming up in a slide in a minute. Okay, any questions on the tobacco outlet?
George, you have a comment or question? George has the floor.
This on? Oh, like nobody else get up, so I'm going to get up. How do we decide how much the cigarettes, the sale of cigarettes, I'm not sure, Bruce, is it 50 or 60 for a carton up there? $50 a carton in Bella Bella. We sell it for 80. There must be some more money being made than that, or did everybody quit smoking and let it be? To buy a pack of smokes is $6 up there, you know, and that's the same, goes to the same thing. How come that money is being transferred to the Namgis House when Namgis House already has funding? I'd like to know how that works. I mean, like, all I want is that we have a say what happens. I don't want to witch hunt or nothing, but I mean, the profits belong to the members. I mean, why would we be involved in this if it didn't benefit the members? And I don't think Namgis House benefits us because they already get money to run it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief George. Deb, would like to respond, Chief Deborah?
Thank you. For those who don't know, Namgis House refers to the old St. Michael's Residential School building. And for a number of years, we had expenses in operating that building, and we had tenants, some of whom didn't always pay their rent. So that resulted in a cumulative deficit of approximately $1 million for that building. And there were no independent sources of monies to pay off that deficit. So before the building came down, and even now, we need to wipe out that deficit because it sits in our books and it's not going to go away. So the decision was made to apply some of the tobacco sales to drawing down that deficit. So that's essentially what that 300 and something thousand from tobacco revenues went to do. So that hopefully explains to you what that was and why it happened, because there is no independent source of revenues to take away the deficit on the old St. Michael's Residential School building.
Thank you. And Jamie Hunt has a question or comment. Please take the floor.
Oh, it's on. I'm hoping that we can get this presentation because there's nothing on the table for this. And I can't see the little numbers up there. I also wanted to say something about the tobacco sales. I know of other Kwakwaka'wakw nations who use tobacco sales to support the elders and the youth programs strictly for that. And I'm wondering why our band isn't doing that.
Thank you, Jamie. Response from Chief and Council? Chief Deborah has the floor.
We have donations budget, which isn't huge, that we use to support youth and elders and others in our community. And that $50,000 per year for donations is basically derived from our administration budget. We charge 10% to most departments for office services, and that gives us a little bit of flexibility to generate money for that purpose. You know, ideally, it would be great in the future to apply tobacco sales or something to that effect to youth. And so, but at the present time, you know, a bulk of the profits from that went to Namgis House. And as you can see, it still needs, it would take some time to accumulate enough funds, but that's an interesting suggestion. So we'll take that suggestion forward. And we also have a community benefit fund from Quagis, which our first payment, as indicated in Kina's presentation, was $26,000. In future years, it's anticipated that that community benefit fund will be in the neighborhood of $55,000 per year. So obviously, those are funds that we can start using to apply to community purposes to benefit our youth, to benefit our elders, and benefit others in our community who need programs and services and activities.
One moment. Corey has a comment for Jamie as well, and then Bert, you will take the floor.
Just in terms of the presentation, the presentation has been provided to the administration, and so Lynn has a copy. So if anybody wants a copy, they could see the administration to get a copy of the presentation.
Thank you. And Bert, please take the floor.
I know a few years ago, a promise was made about I believe about the tobacco sales would go towards the rec center and the needs of the community for our youth and programs. So I'm wondering if the band council are going to move towards that to promote recreation for our community from the tobacco sales.
Thank you, Bert. Responses, Chief Deborah Henus.
I wasn't aware of the commitment made to apply tobacco revenues to the rec center. And we do have an expenditure plan that sets out generally how we propose to spend profits and other monies. That's the next presentation. So if you still have questions after that, then please bring them forward again. But if you could wait until we get through the expenditure plan and see if you still have questions, that would be great.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the floor? If not, then Corey will continue with his presentation.
Okay, the next is the gas station. And so the gas station started operations in the 2010 fiscal year. and has sort of, as demonstrated by the line there, had some years of net income and years of lower net income or no income. In 2010, as far as transfers go out of the program, there was a transfer to capital projects in the financial statements, and although we don't have confirmation of it, it's believed that it was used to assist with the construction of the gas station, which took place in the capital projects department. This shows a summary of the income statement, revenues, and expenses for the gas station. The gross profit, which is basically the percentage that is earned on every dollar of gas that is sold, has been averaging somewhere around 20 or 21%. So every dollar of gas that's sold, close to 80% of it goes to pay for the gas itself from the supplier, and leaves about 20 or 21 cents to cover other administration expenses related to the gas station. After the other expenses are paid, it's leaving net income somewhere in the range between $10,000 and $20,000 per year. So of the $89,000 that was transferred to the capital projects to help pay for the gas station in 2010, now paid a little more than 3/4 of that off, a little less than 3/4 of that off, and about $25,000 or $26,000 still remaining to be paid back. So by the end of 2016 or into the 2017 year, we should start to see an accumulated surplus in this department. Okay, any questions on the gas station?
Well, sorry, do you know her name? Please take the floor. All right. Deborah Henners has the floor.
I don't have information immediately at my fingertips at how prices are set at the gas station. So we'll make inquiries hopefully before the end of the 2 days on how prices are set, so we can bring that back to you. So we'll get an answer for that hopefully before the next 2 days are over. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the floor in this regard? Then Corey will continue with his presentation.
Yeah, I don't have any answers in terms of how the gas prices are set here either. But some of it is going to be controlled by the supplier in terms of how much you're paying for gas from the supplier. And then in order to break even or make a profit, the prices have to be set accordingly. And the other thing is that as the price of oil drops, yes, the price from the supplier might drop, but you're not going to take advantage of that until you have to replenish the inventory. So it takes a while sometimes for the prices to catch up with the changes in oil. Okay, the next section is Atlee Resources. So this is where we're dealing with monies that have come in or share of profits from Atlee Resources, and then any of that money that was transferred from Atlee to be used in other areas of the nation. In 2011, there was $170,000 that was transferred from Atlee to the nation. $150,000 of that went to administration, and we're going to have a slide coming up on the transfers to administration to kind of show how some of that was handled. $10,000 to training, and $10,000 to the closed containment project, which was the lead up to the Kutera project. And then in 2012, 2013, and 2014, there was a total of $1.8 million that was transferred from Atlee, and that went into administration as well. And again, we'll see that when we look at the administration slide in a minute. And finally, in 2015, there was $100,000 that was transferred from Atlee, and that has gone into a new program in the nation called Business Resources, and essentially the money is just sitting in Business Resources to be spent or allocated from there. It's not actually been spent yet. Now, if there's any questions specific to Atlee, I could address those now. If it's related to the transfers from Atlee to administration, then we might want to wait until we see the administration slide in a minute. Anything specific to Atlee? Okay, this is the Namgis excavating program. So again, this is the share of net income from Namgis excavating, and then how that money was transferred within the nation. In 2014, there was a little over $60,700 that was transferred to administration, and again, we'll see that on the administration slide. And then just this past year, there was a little over $21,000 that was also transferred to the Business Resources program, and that's also sitting in surplus in Business Resources. Okay, any questions specific to Namgis excavating? Okay, this slide is the transfers to administration. So going back to the Atlee slide, there was a $1,950,000, so just under $2 million that has been transferred over the past 5 years to administration. And then we had a little over $60,700 that was transferred from the Namgis excavating. So just over $2,010,000 that's come in from those businesses over the 5 years and has been transferred to administration. The first line of expenditures is related to a strategic community plan to pay consulting fees to assist with that. That totaled about $34,000 over the course of the really 3 years. There was $800,000 that was transferred to the Forest and Range Agreement to pay back some money to the Forest and Range Agreement program. And then there was a little over $330,000 that was a payment to help repay the deficit in Namgis House. So if you remember back to the tobacco outlet, there was about $387,000, I think, in the tobacco program transferred, and another $331,000 essentially out of these monies that was used to cover that deficit that was accumulated in Namgis House. So the total expenditures are just over $1,165,000. which leaves about 845,000 still in surplus in administration. So although that money's been transferred to administration, it hasn't all been spent there. So the 845,000 is sitting in surplus in administration, and there's $800,000 that is sitting in surplus in the Forest and Range Agreement. So really, out of the $2,010,000 that was transferred from Otley and Namgis Excavating, there's almost $1,650,000 still on the books in surplus, not been spent yet. Okay, so any questions on the transfers or payments out of administration?
Chief George, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, that's good presentation. We've been asking this for a long time and never ever got this from the past administration and chief and council. I really applaud the new council for what they're doing for us. No, there's $1,600,000 from the profits from our organizations right now. Is that what you said? Okay. Who decided to transfer that money to administration? I mean, did it come from a general members meeting? How did you decide that? Because that profit is coming outside the reserve. The administration is only responsible for unreserved activities. That's off reserve, and that should have to come to the members. And I don't believe in this. Anything under 500,000, you have to go to the members for. I mean how is anybody going to start a business here in the Namgis? We're all broke. Unless you're working for the band, you're broke. Now, how are you going to start a business if you don't have equity? Where are you going to get money to start the business if you wanted to? Nowhere. That's why I believe that our organization should be helping people. I mean, I don't say just give everybody 25,000 each and it's yours. I mean, like, help them with the business plan, get it together, look after them until they're established, and then move on, let them go on their own. See, we did that before we had about 10 different little forest companies. They weren't really like major loggers that, but they bid on tree farm, planting trees and for the hydro thing and that. Well, when there was a change in council, they said, we're not babysitters, let them go. Well, like I said before, we got the best workers around, but not all of us know how to run a business or how to keep books. So that was a big mistake. We don't have any more we do, like, start now with Rachel, who's doing a great job for our organization now. But prior to that, there was no way of looking after those kind of things. And there is no future for our kids unless we start doing things like this. I mean, what is those kids in that school? Why are they going to try and better themselves if there's no future? I think that if they've seen something like this, that the band's interested and they're going to help people create wealth and create a job and do different things, that's a better way than just throwing it into administration and paying the same people already making big money to make more money. I mean, it should go to the community and ask us what we think. I mean, like I said, I don't think we're just going to go throw the money around like a huikui dance, but I think there's got to be a plan in place for us to go ahead. I'd just like to thank you for this part, but I'd like to know from, I don't know, who would answer the whole
magnitude, so we were having that sidebar conversation. In the past, monies were transferred into administration, and from administration they were transferred out. And Corey's given you the pie chart to show where a majority of the FRO and FRA monies went. The majority of them went to new businesses. So our equity contribution to the businesses was where a lot of the money was spent, and then to enhance our ability to manage our natural resources. As you could see from the pie chart of the 10 years that Corey provided, a majority of the money, a sum of the money went to the guani hatchery and to chum enhancement. So that's where those monies went. So they went to purposes that were trying to create more wealth to generate for our community. So that's where they were spent. And when they were transferred out in that manner, it was hard to see at a glance how much we received and how much we've spent. So we recognize that, and what we've done, and I think in Corey's, one of his slides, you see there's a business fund now. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but the purpose of that is that anytime there's a transfer in from a company, it now goes to that one spot, so that you can see in that schedule any transfers or any expenditures that are made with that money. So that's our way of trying to ensure that it's more transparent and easily identifiable for any expenditures that are made going forward. So, we appreciate your concerns. We've taken some steps to address some of those concerns, and I think there's always room for improvement in anything, and that's all we're trying to do, just to, manage these monies as best we can. Kila Kesla.
Thank you, Chief Deborah. Oh, and sorry, Art has the floor.
Yeah, to add a little bit more to that, it wasn't structured like the way it is today, where we get a little bit of clarity. Our admin would see a problem and identify it and bring it to council. And if you check into the past, every new truck that was put on its reserve was paid out through Otley, and there's two accounts for Otley. One was the forest range agreement, and the other one was our allocation to log. So it gets confusing when you look at it, but that's basically how it went. And they brought a request to council, and all council was involved when we made the decisions to spend that money, like the bus and all this other stuff that we've done in the past. And when you start adding up one truck at $60,000-$70,000, it's pretty expensive. Okay, that's just some of it, not all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Art. Are there any other questions or comments on the floor to this regard? Corey will continue with his presentation, and then we have a short presentation as well from Lynn.
Just to kind of follow up on that point about the spending of the administration money, 34,000 is really all that was spent directly out of administration on some professional fees or professional services. The 331,000 was spent out of Namgis house, which Chief Deborah has mentioned earlier. Yes, it was funded out of some of this money. The rest of it is still remaining either in the Forest and Range Agreement program or in the administration surplus. So, although it may have been transferred to administration, it hasn't necessarily all been spent in that area, and a fair portion of it still remains in surplus today. So I think that concludes my presentation on the business revenues. Lynn's got a couple of slides related to some of the spending on the Forest and Range Agreement.
Thank you very much. Lynn, please come and take the floor.
So this is just a better this is just a better breakdown of the Forest and Range Agreement funds and how they were spent.
There's some hard of hearing right in that corner there, so you have to talk right into the mic for those ladies.
Okay, thank you. There we go. In November 2004, Namgis signed a forest and range agreement with the province of BC. So we're only talking about these provincial dollars. They receive cash every year to harvest 410,000 cubic meters of timber. Whoops. So looking at it from 2004 right till 2015, the total, and there was a handout for this, the total revenue from the province was $6,686,730. And then we're just going to list through over, I guess it's a 10 and a half year period, this is what it was spent on. Forest and range costs and signing ceremony, $15,119. Brookfield signing ceremony, $9,000. The Orca sand and gravel investment that was mentioned, $495,000, and that was matched with AANDC dollars. The investment in Kutera, $1,129,336. So under the asset category, we had two trucks, $80,115. A boat and communication equipment, $70,000. The annex building over here, $185,413. The Carver Studio, $5,444. 4 cabins, their construction, repair, and the grease trail, $375,495. The boardwalk, water beautification, and the aqueous, $685,168. Forester wages, benefits, and activities through this program paid for a registered forester, $848,403. 2 FRA tenure assessments, $101,510. And a natural resource officer and mapping and GIS person, wages, benefits, and their activities, consultant fees, $371,300. Then to continue on with the hatchery received funding for fish fertilization, $262,700. Resource management fisheries program projects, $495,809. Chum enhancement, $268,163. The following group are under economic development. Economic development consultant wages and projects, $373,664. Business planning assistance, $62,810. And that was the consultant that helped members with business plans. Economic development opportunities, $125,981, and that was just to explore opportunities for the nation or members. Nanima Publishing, $25,000, and that was matched with $25,000 of treaty funding. Net Loft Repairs, $25,000. St. Mike Umista Expansion Plan, $33,386. The Nurses Residence Feasibility Study, $19,971. Gas Station Planning and Construction, $61,909. There was a fuel dock study. Waterhead assessment and repairs, $70,419. St. George's cleanup, which was a specific claim, $63,000. Employment and training, $69,820 for training such as forestry, fisheries, and driver's training, some ABE assessment. Learning Center startup and renovations, $20,749. Namgis Information Technology computer upgrades and tablets, $175,919. $70,000 for a forensic audit and related costs. And the Cormorant Island Skate Park, $20,000. So a total of $6,723,239 was spent. We received funds from AANDC for the boardwalk, so the $600,000 was put back into the Forest and Range program. Again, the transfer that Corey talked about from administration has gone back into this Forest and Range program to leave a surplus at the end of 2015 of $1,363,131. So that's what's remaining in that Forest and Range Fund.
Thank you very much, Lynn. We have, Renee will take the floor, and in one moment, we have one more presentation to get through by Chief Deborah Hanous before lunch, so please try and make your questions and comments as specific as you can. Renee?
I just want to know how much the federal government paid towards the dismantling of St. Mike's. I mean, I see us paying money, but is that money coming in for a specific purpose and spent, or?
The residential school demolition? Yeah, was $1.8 million, sorry.
It costs $108 million to take it down?
Yes.
Okay.
And we received that funding, that specific funding from AANDC, from the federal government.
Okay, so.
But this was previous years' spending over the last 10, 11 years.
Okay, and that was all the water in the building, all the rest of that stuff? Okay.
Yes.
So the band didn't actually pay any money towards taking resident?
No, we received all the funding from the federal government.
Thanks.
Thank you, and we will get additional comments. I think that was well answered, so we'll get Chief George, please take the floor.
Hello. Oh, okay, on how much money's being spent on the gym? And the reason I'm asking that is when Wayne Cook put a plan together for the gym, our office is supposed to be built around the gym, so that would pay for the maintenance and overhead of the gym. I don't know who in their wisdom separated the gym and the band office, but Wayne Cook, we spent good money, Wayne Cook put a plan together, and the whole office was to surround this gym, and we're going to pay for the gym that way. I can't believe that happened. The other thing is, how much money does the hatchery get from the sport fishermen? Because when they were going to shut the hatchery down, we went to Ottawa, we went to Victoria, we met with all these agencies, and they had to build a new hatchery here. The sports fishermen came, they said, we're going to donate X amount of money towards the hatchery to help it out. And, because we're producing spring coal, supposed to be expanding. But do we still get that money from those outfits? I don't know who to ask on the council. I don't expect you to answer that because you don't know anything about that. But what happened to that money that we had from the sports fishermen coming in to help offset some of our costs for the hatchery? Did they just let it lapse, or what happened? I'd just like to know from somebody here. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Chief and Council, would somebody like to respond to this? Chief Deborah Hanous will have the floor.
We have to take that question under advisement. I don't know about any revenues from sports fishing, and so we'll endeavor during the break, the lunch break, to get that answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions from the floor to this matter? And if not, then we have Chief Deborah Hanous will come up and speak. Oh, sorry, we have one more comment that Lynn would like to add.
Just that I will make copies at lunchtime of Corey's presentation and leave it on the table for anybody that wants a copy.
Okay, do you want to have lunch or do you want to hear my presentation? It's about roughly 10 minutes, so I guess we'll try to wrap up mine because we need to try to get Corey on the 3 o'clock ferry so we can come to the audited financial statements right after the break. So here goes. So we've heard from Kina the monies that the companies have made and how much of those monies have been transferred over to Namgis. We've heard from Corey and we've heard from Lynn as to how those monies have been spent in the past. So we've heard that there's $1.363 million in the forest and revenue account. And I don't have that on my slides, but I just want to speak to it before I get to how we intend to spend the monies that remain that are profits from the businesses. First of all, in regard to, as Lynn just pointed out in her slide, there's $1.363 million left in the forest and range account. Presently, we have limitations on our ability to spend that money for two main reasons. First of all, the nation has guaranteed some loans for some of our companies, and this year, some of those loan guarantees are due. And those agreements, those loan agreements are currently being renegotiated. But in the worst case scenario, if those loans get called in, we need to have money available to pay. And the value of the loan guarantees that are due this year is $1.3 million. So it's exactly what we have in our FRO account. So if we started spending that money and the banks decided they wanted to call in the loan, we'd be in serious trouble. So we're being very fiscally prudent, and we're preserving those monies until all of these bank loan negotiations are resolved. That's one reason. The second reason, and you'll see it in my presentation, is that we have a number of accumulated deficits within our organization. And part of these came from decisions that were made at earlier general meetings. For example, we determined that it was really important for our community to have a dentist. That has cost us significantly. So in that program, as an example, I believe that the accumulated deficit for that program alone is $900,000. So that just gives you an idea of the magnitude of the kind of deficits that we have. So that if we started to spend that $1.3 million, this 1.3 is really a cushion against all those accumulated deficits. So that if we start to spend that 1.3 until we address our accumulated deficits, then we could find ourselves under close scrutiny by ANSI, because they have ways of measuring our financial performance, and they call those a debt equity ratio. There's about 4 or 5 ratios that ANSI will look at to measure the financial stability of an organization or a band council or a band like ours. Right now, we have very good ratios, and that's in large part because of this cushion. And so the minute we start affecting this cushion, we're going to affect our debt equity ratios. So we could find ourselves getting very close to the line of third-party management or something. Those are worst-case scenarios. We're quite fine. As you can see, we have a 1.3 million cushion. We have some money in the kitty from our businesses. And this year, we have less revenues than we would comfortably like to have, but we have revenue streams that are coming in the future that will help us to be able to invest in our community to create jobs. And so what the purpose of this presentation is to show you that we want to be fiscally responsible. We want to spend these monies in a way that benefits our community, just as it's been done in the past. You can see from the way that the $6 million was spent went primarily to community purposes and to improving our ability to manage our resources. So we want to continue that pattern. Whoops. So the starting point for this conversation about how we're going to spend our money is our financial management policy. So there's already a policy in place, and it says that any expenditures over $500,000 must come back to the members for approval. So that's a policy that's in place that this council abides by. So any expenditure over $500,000 must come to the membership. So that's clearly set out in a policy. So the next part, and we heard from, I believe it was Lynn, we have, and you have this presentation in your, it was a handout, and at the very back is sort of a current balance. So presently we have $371,000 in that business fund account that we talked about that's been set up so that there's one place that any money coming in from the business lands, and it lands in that business fund account. As Lynn and others have pointed out, there's $371,000 in that account. So of all the revenues we've received from the businesses in the past, what's presently available and left in that revenue stream is $371,000. And that consists of recent revenues that have been received from those companies, $100,000 from Atlee, $21,000 from Namgis Excavating, and $250,000 from Quaggies Power. So of that $371,000, do we have any expenditures planned at this moment? The answer is no. That's not a whole lot of money. And so what our goal is to build that account so that we can actually invest in the community that can have meaningful results for community in terms of jobs and dealing with some of the social and other issues that we face in the community. So if we were to spend it, though, how are we going to spend it? So council spent time. We had a planning session, a couple of planning sessions. We brought this formula back to council a couple of times for further discussion and approval as to how we would spend money. And it was no easy task because there are so many priorities in this community, so many areas that need attention. How could you possibly prioritize all of those needs into one formula as to how we were going to spend that money? So this is not carved in stone, and obviously we need to test this out and see how it works. But this is the consensus that was reached among council as to how we would manage the monies that are the people's monies. Because as George kept pointing out, it is the people's money, and this is what the plan is as to how those monies would be spent going forward. So this is an overview of the plan, and I'll talk about each of these components in more detail as we go forward. So as you see, a flat amount off the top for Aboriginal title and rights, because that's so fundamentally important. Then a legacy fund, which I'll talk about more, 10% allocated to that. Economic development, because you can't create jobs without somehow stimulating your economy, so a bigger percentage would go to economic development, 35%. Social and cultural, this is a hard one. Obviously, we'd want to be putting way more money to dealing with social issues and language preservation, but given all the pressing other needs at this point in time, and this could change in future years, 10% is allocated to that particular purpose. Governance capacity. We got some of the results back from our community visioning that was recently undertaken. And a lot of folks have said, yes, we're not ready for self-government. And we're under the Indian Act, so we probably aren't ready to fully govern ourselves. We're not going to get there if we don't invest in improving our capacity to govern ourselves. So 10% to be invested into governance capacity. Community infrastructure, I'll talk more about why we've put some money towards community infrastructure as I get into the detailed component, but 10% there. And finally, I'll get into more detail about some of the deficits we have, but we can't continue to let them sit there. We need to start addressing them. So in order to pay those deficits down for the present time until they're dealt with, 25% will be allocated to deficit reduction under this plan. So first of all, Aboriginal title and rights. Our fundamental goal is we have so much wealth. Our territory is full of vast wealth, and it's not just money for us. It's more important than that. It's preserving our way of life. And so if we're to accomplish those goals, we need to put money to that purpose. And because that is so important, and there's this window of opportunity now, we're saying that it's a flat amount that should be taken from the top to address title and rights, as opposed to a percentage. So we just put as a sample that for this year, as a sample, this is not how we plan to spend it, that $75,000 would be taken from the $371,000 currently available and could be applied to title and rights. That would leave $296,100. That would leave that for distribution in accordance with that formula. So the percentages are derived from this amount of $296,100. So legacy fund, what is the legacy fund? Well, the whole idea is we can't just spend money and not preserve some for future generations. It's not just our money, but it's the money of the future. And so the whole idea of this is that if we have $1 million in any given year, well, 10% of that belongs to the future. So of that 1 million, if that was the amount we had, 100,000 would go to the future. So we'd put that in an account, save that for future generations so that they have a fund that they can draw on when they're faced with challenges or they want to do some development. The next amount is for economic development. And if we're going to create jobs in our community and if we're going to reduce the dependence on income assistance, then we need to invest in economic growth. And so there are a number of ways we can do that, and we want to do it through job creation, support for Namgis entrepreneurs. We need to stimulate the local economy. The band is the biggest employer here. If the government of Canada decided tomorrow they weren't going to fund us anymore, we'd lose all those jobs, and the backbone of the economy here in this community would vanish. The stores would go away because there'd be no more monies from people who are employed in this organization. So we are very dependent on government revenue, so we need to create independence, and that can be achieved by investing in our community and creating a viable local economy. And part of what we're doing to accomplish that is we're working together with the Village of Alert Bay to do the Tides of Change economic strategy together. Some of the priorities that have been identified by the community are downtown revitalization, harbor development, and we basically need to develop a tourism strategy. That's the major opportunity that we could draw on in order to stimulate our local economy. And of course, we need to establish new businesses. We would rather see Namgis members become business people and create jobs for our own people, but there may be a requirement for us to establish a company or two locally in order to stimulate the economy. So as you can see, we have a huge task in front of us and not a whole lot of money to do it. As you can see, we have, if we were to allocate in accordance with this formula, we only have $103,000 available to us this year to stimulate the economy and meet all of these objectives. So we have to be very, very careful and very, very strategic how any monies get invested from this point on. So we're going to ensure that we get the proper advice and develop the proper business plans and test the feasibility of any proposal that comes forward, because there's not a lot of money in the kitty and it has to be used very strategically. The next is social and cultural, and there's a whole multitude of issues in our community that need to be addressed. Food security. There's a drought in California. Their ability to produce fruit and vegetables out of California is diminished and it's never going to return. So if we don't want to pay through the roof, sky-high prices for fruit and vegetables, we need to improve our ability to do so in this community. We need to, it's not just a wish, it's essential, it's absolutely vital, and our survival depends on it. Hydro has announced increases over the next 5 years of up to 28%. Your hydro bills in 5 years are going to go up by 28%. In order to ensure our members are not left cold in the winters, we need to invest in alternative energy. We need to look at solar panels, windmills on your roof, compost gardens in the back that can generate electricity enough to run your washing machine or your... So there's lots of sort of, in order just to take care of the basic needs and survival needs of our community, that 10% needs to go to things like that. Our language defines who we are, and we're losing it. And if we want to preserve our language, then it would be out of this kind of fund that money would come. And as you can see, all we have for those big tasks is $29,000 at this point in time if we were to allocate in accordance with this formula. So we really need to build our reserves so that we have the resources necessary to accomplish these goals. The next is governance capacity. And again, we have huge job to do on this front. We all want to get out of the Indian Act. The minister has to approve almost everything we do. It slows down our ability to get businesses up and running. Anytime you want to develop your lands, you got to wait for the minister's blessing. So, that's a challenge. We've heard from our people through the community surveys that have been done that our people for the future want a blended form of government made up of both hereditary and traditional. We're not going to get there if we don't start doing the work now. Some of that work was kickstarted with the Constitution development. That work needs to continue on an ongoing basis, so we find a way to get ourselves out of the Indian Act and govern ourselves in accordance with our own traditions. We have a policy development committee that identified 30 policies that need development or revision, and we don't have internal capacity to do that. There's no one dedicated to that purpose, and that's a lot of work that needs to be done in order so that we can be more responsive to the community and more accountable to the community. So we need to fill that gap, and hopefully we don't have to draw on this money. Hopefully we can draw on ANSI monies for that purpose. We have a lot of plans in draft form, plans that would bring us to the future in a confident way to be able to govern ourselves. A comprehensive community plan has been developed. It's in its final stages, needs to be finalized. We have numerous fisheries and aquatic resource management plans, and these need to be finalized. And if we're going to stimulate economic growth, we need land use plans. What areas are going to be zoned industrial? What areas are going to be zoned residential? What areas are going to be zoned commercial? So that if our members want to build businesses on our lands, then we've got that infrastructure and regulatory framework in place to make that happen. So those are the kind of things we need to do on the governance front. And of course, we do have wonderful staff who do a great job in delivering services and programs to our community, but there are gaps. And so as a result, we overwork a lot of people, and that's just not healthy. And we need to model good health and good practices, and that means there are gaps that need to be filled. So we don't have policy development and capacity. We need that. We need a human resource manager. Our accounting staff is overworked. We need more people in the accounting department. And of course, we don't have a dedicated person to housing. It's sort of off the side of people's desks. And really, if we're going to solve that big issue, we really need more dedicated staff members to that purpose. So again, we've allocated 10% to that purpose. And if that was to be applied with the monies currently in the bank, it would be $29,000 that would be allocated to that purpose. So again, you can see the magnitude of challenges that we face and the limited resources that we have to address those. Community infrastructure. We have a number of buildings that we don't receive any funding for. So for example, we have the dock and the breakwater. There is no independent source of money for that particular asset. We have the oyster plant, which is just sitting there that we'd like to refurbish and either lease out or start using, but there's no monies for the refurbishment. So we would then need to draw on a fund like this in order to pay for that refurbishment. Our big house operates at a deficit regularly. We generate $5,000 per year in fees, but it costs $25,000 a year to operate. So we operate at a continual deficit in the big house, and so we need monies because that means we don't have a capital reserve for it. So, well, maybe we do. Maybe that's not correct. I think it's, the kitchen is in need of repairs, the stoves need repairs, but there's no independent source of monies to draw on. So this is where, if we had a vast pool of independent revenues, we could draw on that to keep our big house in better state. And we have cabins that we've built to make our statement about sovereignty on our lands, but we don't have an independent source of revenues to pay for repairs to those cabins when they're required. And so that's another challenge that we face. If we're going to keep those maintained so that they last longer, we need to find ways to generate revenues to pay for the repairs to the cabins. We just got the St. George's nurses' lands transferred back to us, and with that we inherit the old nurses' residence building. Its roof is leaking and in need of repairs. It's gone through 10 or 15 winters of being rained on through big holes in the roof. It's not going to last many more years if we don't put a roof on that building. But again, there is no independent source of money. We've got some quotes to get some repairs just to preserve the building if we're in fact going to do something with it. So that's just an example of some of the community infrastructure issues that require some money where there is no independent source of money. And I think that's the last slide here is the deficit reduction. So as you can see, we have a number of deficits, and I didn't put them all up. I put the ones that were over $150,000 up. So as you can see, the dental clinic has a deficit of $911,000. Now on that front, our Director of Health and our Senior Administrator recently met with representatives of the First Nations Health Authority, and I think that they've had some promising signs out of that meeting that will get some assistance in dealing with this particular deficit. And so thank you to our staff for that ongoing work. But it's an example of a deficit that currently sits on the books of $911,000. Specific claims has a deficit of $353,000. If we ever settle a claim, obviously the monies we receive in settlement would go to pay that off. But there's no imminent sign of any specific claim being settled in the near future. So, that's going to sit on the books for a while and affect our debt equity ratios, et cetera. Physician services, we subsidize the physician's clinic so that we can have doctors in this community, because if we didn't do that, then the hospital would have to shut down, because without doctors, the hospital cannot operate. So it's a rock and a hard place. We need to continue subsidizing physician services. We've got a deficit that occurred due to all sorts of funding loops and all of the challenges with federal government funding requirements. We want to provide services to our community members, but if they have income levels that don't meet the federal requirements, then we're effectively subsidizing the community care service that is provided to elders and others through community care. The net loft and the breakwater, you can all see the state of our net loft. It really needs repairs, and our breakwater, but there are deficits that are in the books on those particular assets as well. And the guani hatchery required subsidization in one particular year, and unless we start developing a strategy to reduce those deficits, those are going to continue to sit in the books until we come up with a plan. So because of the magnitude of our current accumulated deficits, which are in excess of $2 million, we're proposing for the present time that something to the tune of 25% of our own source revenues be allocated to deficit reduction. And if that was the case this year, we would be in a position to, if we implemented this plan, to apply $74,000 towards deficit reduction. But as you can see in the note, if we were to apply $75,000 a year to a $2 million plus deficit, it would take us 27 years at this rate to pay that off. So we have a long ways to go to deal with some of the deficits that have accumulated. Of course, we're not going to sit on our laurels. There are other ways we can reduce that deficit, including talking to governments where we can secure additional revenue streams from First Nation Health Authority, ANSI, et cetera. So we're going to continue to pursue those options. But in the meantime, we need to develop a plan to start bringing those deficits down. So next steps, what are we going to do? Well, first of all, rest assured that if there's any expenditure in excess of $500,000, we'll come to you. Rest assured, there's only $371,000 in the kitty, so we're not likely going to be spending too much this year. So, I think you might want to ask this question again at the May General Assembly and at next year's Annual General Assembly. Right now, our goal is to build our business fund. So we're going to get $250,000 more from Quaggy's Power before the end of this year. And Atlee's currently logging 4 blocks, so we can expect some revenue streams from Atlee within this fiscal year, towards the end of it or early next fiscal year. The new company, Danyas, is not quite finalized yet, but it should be able to log some this year, so there'll be some revenue from that particular operation as well. So there are revenue streams that will help us to be able to address issues and challenges in the community. And if we're going to make any expenditures, it will be done in accordance with this plan and this formula. And so we really want your feedback on the formula. It's really been challenging identifying the priorities in our community that need money and attention from business profits. And so if you've got ideas or you don't like the formula, then by all means, I don't know that we have time today to hear all of the feedback, and we can bring this back again at the next meeting so that you can mull over it between now and May and then come back fully prepared to talk about it. Or we have breakout sessions later today, And we do have some suggested topics for the breakouts, but if you want to talk about this formula today as part of that, you're welcome to have that conversation, and we welcome any of the feedback that we get from that. And we're going to do our best to work within this formula between now and May, and we'll come back and tell you how difficult or easy that was, and whether or not we think it needs any tweaking. So that concludes my presentation. Gila Kesla.
Thank you, Chief Deborah. We are going to break for lunch because we're all starving. Dixon's going to give lunch a blessing and a prayer. Thank you. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. At the front, I have the financial statements. This is going to be the next presentation. It's a big, thick booklet, and it'll be very helpful if you have it in front of you, because it will be hard to read on the screen. It will probably be hard for you to read it if you have it right in front of you. So if you don't yet have this, it's the big, thick one at the front entitled Namgis First Nation Financial Statements, March 31st, 2015. If we could get Corey to come up to the front to give the presentation. Corey and Lynn.
Okay. First of all, I'm not sure it's the best idea to present the audited financial statements right after lunch. So, the package that's available is about 128 pages long. Don't worry, we're not going to go through all 128 pages. I'll try to go through it as briefly as I can, but also touch on some of the highlights or important points. And then I'll try and address any questions afterwards. I'm not sure how well it's going to work on the overhead here or on the screen. In order to get it to show up large enough, we can only show about half a page at a time. So you might want to refer to the handout. The first thing I want to point out is the index to the financial statements. And this first section here, which is really the first 28 pages of the document, is really what the financial statements are, the consolidated financial statements. The other 100 or so pages after that is what provides more detailed information that's already contained in the summary or consolidated statements. So I'm going to concentrate on the first 28 pages. The first item on that is the management statement of responsibility, which is just after the index. And this is one of the pages that's signed by Chief and Counsel, and it really outlines what management's responsibility is for the financial statements. It's management's responsibility to prepare the accounting records, prepare the financial information, and then it's our role or our duty to audit that information and provide an opinion. And so on the next page is where you see the independent auditor's report, which is where we give our opinion. And again, in the second paragraph of this report, it again outlines a little bit about management's responsibility for the actual financial statements themselves. Then it gives a bit of information about what the auditor's responsibilities are in terms of auditing that information. And then finally, in the last paragraph, we have our opinion. And in this case, again, it's what we call a clean or unqualified opinion, which means the financial statements, in our opinion, are fairly presented in accordance with the standards that are being followed, which is the public sector accounting standards. The consolidated statements themselves, the first one on page 1 is the consolidated statement of financial position, also sometimes referred to as a balance sheet. This is what shows a snapshot of the assets, liabilities, and net assets at the year-end date, March 31st, 2015, and we've got some comparatives to the previous fiscal year-end. A couple of things that I would note here is, first of all, we have financial assets listed first, which are assets that are cash or like cash. And the first two lines show the cash and term deposits, as well as the restricted cash and term deposits. So for 2015, the total of those together is about $10,650,000, compared to about $8,670,000 the previous year. So an increase of close to $2 million from 2014 to 2015. So a good increase in terms of a cash position. One of the reasons for that, though, is that there is a large amount in accounts payable, meaning there was a lot of money that had been expenses that were incurred in 2015 but hadn't been paid, and so the money was still sitting in the bank. Those expenses were paid in most likely April and May, just after the fiscal year. One of the biggest contributing factors to that is because there was a fair bit of capital work going on in March towards the end of the fiscal period with the demolition of the St. Michael's site and also a water project. So there's a lot of expenditures incurred in late February and March, and those didn't get paid until April or May. And so that helped increase the amount of cash that was sitting in the bank accounts at the end of the year. The other interesting number on here is the net debt figure, and this net debt figure is basically taking your financial assets and subtracting all of the debt or liabilities. That includes anything that was owing to others at the end of the fiscal period. Included in the liabilities is some reserves, and those reserves are, they're considered a liability, but it's really money that is set aside in a reserve for the nation. And the biggest component of that is one that Deborah talked about just before the break regarding the license fund, the fishing license fund. About $845,000 is sitting in that fund. So it's showing as if it's a liability because it isn't, we don't want it to sit in unrestricted funds and be spent on any other activities. It's quite common for a government organization to have a net debt figure, and that really represents the amount of money that has been used to finance capital type expenditures. So after the net debt figure, we get into the non-financial assets, which are mainly, in this case, mainly capital assets, which are the tangible assets, buildings, vehicles, equipment, and so forth. And the value on the financial statements is just under $14.5 million, overall largely unchanged from the previous year. And that's because there are additional assets either constructed or purchased during the year, but the accounting rules also state that we have to recognize depreciation or decrease in value of those assets. And so in this particular case, the additions more or less were offset by a recognition of depreciation. Then at the bottom of the page, we have the accumulated surplus. So just under $6.8 million compared to about $8 million the year before. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But that represents basically all of the assets minus any liabilities that are payable. And we're left with just under $6.8 million. The next page, I won't really spend too much time on. This just shows the statement of changes in net debt from the previous year. And so we can see overall the change was a decrease of about $1.2 million, which again is mostly made up of the deficit for the year, which we'll see. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the deficit in a minute. The next page is the statement of operations, sometimes referred to as an income statement. And on the top half of this page, we see the details of revenue that was earned during the year by source, starting with the highest dollar amount first. So overall, the total revenue received for the year was about $17,450,000 compared to about $14.5 million the previous year. One of the biggest changes is the increase on the first line, the money that was received from Aboriginal Affairs. And one of the biggest reasons for that increase is because of the funding that was received for the demolition work and other capital projects like the water project and so forth. Most of the actual year-to-year operating funding was unchanged from the previous year. Another significant change is in the fisheries service, and this is mostly a flow-through because the money comes into the nation and then is paid out to the fishermen, but it was certainly more active in 2015 than it was in 2014. Close to $1.1 million in revenue compared to about $340,000 the previous year. And then the bottom line shows a loss of $1.3 million. That's the share of the net loss of the enterprises. So that includes the nation's share of the losses from Kutera in 2015 and Orca Sand and Gravel, Atlee Resources and so forth. And those were reported on by Kina this morning. The overall expenditures, which we'll look at in detail in a minute, totaled about $18,665,000 compared to about $16.4 million the previous year. Again, a lot of that change is related to the capital projects. It was referred to this morning. The demolition project was about $1.8 million or so, so certainly contributed a fair bit to that increase. The other item that would have contributed to the increase would be the flow-through of the money to the fishermen from the fisheries service. So if we take the revenues minus the expenses, the deficiency for the year is that $1.2 million figure. And so that reduced the overall surplus to just under $6.8 million compared to about $8 million the year before. The next statement is the statement of cash flows, and this is just meant to provide some information in terms of where cash came from and where it went during the year. And there's certain items on the financial statements that are recorded that aren't really a use of cash. An example would be the depreciation of a vehicle. The purchase of the vehicle certainly uses cash, but the depreciation of it is not using cash. It's just showing that it's not worth as much anymore. So those things are taken out of the loss figure and added back. And so in terms of operations, cash was provided from operations of about $2.7 million compared to about $300,000 the year before. The next area is capital activities. So that used about $1.2 million purchasing or constructing capital assets. And then the third area is financing activities, and that's mainly came in the form of long-term debt. The net increase to long-term debt for the year was about $471,000. That's related to the loan portions received for the treaty department or treaty negotiations. So overall, the increase in cash, as we saw on the balance sheet, was just under $2 million, and adding that to the roughly 8.7 million from the previous year, we end the year with just under 10,650,000. And it's broken down between cash and term deposits, and then restricted cash and deposits. And included in that restricted cash is the license purchase fund that was referred to earlier. Then we get into a bunch of pages of notes to the financial statements, and the notes to the financial statements are meant to provide additional information regarding the presentation, what sort of accounting policies are being followed, and particularly on the first few pages, the accounting policies are listed there. I generally recommend people that are having trouble sleeping at night pull this page out and start reading it, and you might not get to the fourth page before you fall asleep. It's really exciting to accountants like Lynn and I. The note 3 is one of interest on page 9, which shows a breakdown of the cash and term deposits, that roughly 10,650,000. And so it shows what is restricted. Some of the cash that's restricted is considered externally restricted, meaning it's restricted by someone or an organization outside of the nation. And most of that is in the social housing programs. Canada Mortgage and Housing has rules related to the housing developments, and money has to be kept in reserves for future repair or replacement of the asset. Some of them are internally restricted, meaning they're restricted within or by someone within the nation. And so here's where we see the fishing license program, 845,000. So council or a previous council and management made the decision to restrict those funds, and as was discussed by Deborah earlier, still under discussion in terms of how those funds might be used. But they're restricted in that they can't just spend them on general operations. And then lastly, we have the unrestricted funds, which would be like the surplus funds, and that's broken down between what's in the social housing programs and the main operating fund. On page 10, there's note 5 for the long-term investments. And this shows a breakdown of the monies that are invested in the various business enterprises that were discussed this morning. Orca Sand and Gravel, the investment is about $4.9 million. Quaggas Power, just over $2,500. Otley Resources, about $637,000. WAS Power, about $2,500. And then we have deficit in Kutera Limited Partnership, and just a small amount invested in Namgis Excavating, $122, and then Mama Omis about $211,000. All of that totals about $4.5 million. That is not all made up of cash investment. Some of it is related to share of income or loss from the various businesses over the years. The next couple of pages just show some detailed information about the various businesses and a little bit about the assets and liabilities of those business enterprises. Note 7 on page 13 shows a breakdown of the reserves amount, which I was referring to earlier, that showed up as a liability on the balance sheet. So although it shows up as a liability, it's basically offset by the restricted cash that's in the bank. And so we see the reserves broken down there between the fishing license program and a few reserves that are related to the social housing programs. Note 8 on page 14 is the long-term debt note, and this shows a breakdown of what makes up the long-term debt. If we were looking at the balance sheet, the total long-term debt is a little over $20.8 million, largely made up of the first two items. One is the loan with Quality Sand and Gravel, about $11.6 million, and that was touched on or referred to in the report from Kina this morning. And if we look at the detailed terms of that loan, basically that loan was advanced by Polaris, the other partner in Orca Sand and Gravel, to help pay for the construction and help pay for the 12% interest that the nation has in the project. And the terms of the loan basically state that any future repayments of the loan will be made out of your share of the profits. And if there is no profits to make those payments, then there's no further requirement for the nation to repay that debt. So it should only, the only requirement is to pay it out of your share of the profits. You don't have to use other funds to repay that loan. The second one there is the Government of Canada loan related to the treaty negotiation process. So in the treaty negotiation process, 20% of the funding that is received is contribution funding that does not have to be repaid, and 80% is considered loan or repayable funding. And so that's accumulating over the years and is total just under $9.1 million at the end of the year, compared to about 8.6 the year before. And then we have two smaller loans which are related to the housing programs, the social housing programs. One is at about $59,000 due to be paid out in a couple of years, and the other one is $145,000, again also due to be paid out in a couple of years. The bottom schedule just shows sort of what the principal obligations are to repay those loans, so you can get an idea of how much cash the nation would have to pay each year to repay those loans. And it's really the only repayments at this point are required on the two social housing loans to All Nations Trust. And so that's about $23,000 or $24,000 per year. In 2019, it shows a larger amount, about $132,000, because those loans come due, and the assumption would be that they would be renewed under similar type terms and would continue to require roughly $23,000 or $24,000 a year in payment. And then finally, the balance is going to be due sometime after that point, and that would be largely the Quality Sand and Gravel and the Government of Canada loan. The note 9 on page 16 just shows some details of the tangible capital assets. So we have quite a number of categories of capital assets, ranging from land and buildings to automotive, computer, other furniture and fixtures, and infrastructure and housing. The total cost of all of those assets over the years is about $45.6 million. And the accounting rules state that we have to recognize the depreciation of those over time. And so we have so far recognized a little over $31 million in depreciation or amortization. And so the net book value of them is about $14.5 million. The additions or increases during the year, $1.2 million. A good portion of that is related to the water project, which was work in progress. I think is either been completed or in the process of being completed this year. The next few notes on the next few pages just show some details of the capital assets for the social housing program, the treatment center, and revolving housing. Note 13 on page 20 just shows a breakdown of the accumulated surplus number. And so this is broken down also between restricted and unrestricted. The trust funds are restricted because the monies are held in the Ottawa Trust account, and under the Indian Act, you've got to you can only access that money through the proper channels in order to spend it. Unrestricted funds, it's made up of the investment in capital assets, which is a little over $14 million. Investment in the limited partnership, just over $1 million. That's related to the actual cash invested in Orca Sand and Gravel. And then we've got a deficit figure for the fund balances. And again, we'll take a closer look at that in a minute. Note 15 on page 21 is just outlines some contingent liabilities, and this was touched on in Deborah's presentation before lunch. I consider a contingent liability to be a possible liability, meaning that the nation may be liable contingent upon a particular outcome. And the most significant one at the moment is related to the first two items on the list, where the nation has guaranteed loans for Kutera. And in the event that Kutera is not able to repay those loans, then the lender may call on the guarantee. So if that happens, the nation would be required to make that payment. So although those Kutera loans are not directly shown in these financial statements, they belong in Kutera's financial statements, there is a potential liability for the nation if Kutera is unable to make that payment and the lender calls the guarantee. On page 22, note 16 at the top just shows some details of the overall expenditure numbers for the year. And a couple of note would be the change in the program costs. Program costs were $2.4 million compared to about 1.8 or 1.9 the previous year. That includes the Namgis Fishery Service monies that flow through. So although the expenditures went up, the revenues also went up to offset that. The other big one is repairs and maintenance, a little over $2 million compared to only about $132,000 the previous year. And that's a lot of that is related to the demolition costs, because that's not considered a capital expenditure because there was no capital actually constructed or created. It was demolishing something. And so the cost of that was roughly $1.9 million, and was also funded completely by an increase in revenue. So overall, the expenditures did increase from the previous year, but those two changes make up most of the identified difference. Starting on page 24, we have what's called segmented information. So the various departments in the nation have been grouped together into different department headings: education, administration, health, and so forth. And so these statements show a little bit of more detail in terms of the revenues received in each of those areas and the expenditures. And it shows whether there's an annual surplus or deficit for the year in those areas. Education showed a surplus for the year of $81,243. Administration had a small overall surplus of just under $7,000, about $69.85, and health had a overall surplus of about $478,000. The Child and Family Services, this area showed a deficit for the year of about $115,000. The Natural Resources Department's a small deficit of about $14,500. And then Capital Projects and Revolving Housing, just under a $200,000 surplus. The Commercial Enterprises shows a deficit of $1.3 million. Now, the reason for that is because this is taking into account the nation's share of any income or loss that the business enterprises had during the year. And as we saw from the presentation this morning, Kutera had a loss, Orca Sand and Gravel had a loss, and Otley Resources also had a loss. So your share of those losses all shows up in these financial statements, which contributes to that overall deficit. The Social Housing Fund basically broke even, but that includes a contribution to the reserve for the year. So it actually had a bit of a surplus because more money was put into the reserve. And the trust fund had a small surplus. There was really no expenditures out of the trust fund in 2015. On page 27, the treaty process. The treaty process shows a deficit for the year of about $543,000. Now, one of the reasons for that is, as I mentioned about the treaty funding that is received, 20% of it is contribution funding that doesn't have to be repaid, and the other 80% is repayable. So the only funding that's included in revenue for the treaty is the funding that's not repayable. It's actual contribution funding. That's considered revenue. But under the treaty process, you're expected to spend the full amount, contribution and repayable funding. And so it's always important to compare the surplus or deficit at the end of the year to the amount of repayable funding that was received. And if we added that repayable funding in there, we would show a much smaller deficit. And part of that deficit is also attributable to repayable funding that was received in prior years and not actually spent. So that concludes the consolidated financial statements. I can try and address any questions that people might have about the consolidated statements or any of the other detailed information. And then, once we're done that, I do have some additional charts to show you that to help explain some of the comparison in terms of the revenues and expenditures and the deficit for the year.
So any questions or comments from the floor? Chief George, you want to come up to the mic, please? Take the floor. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I know we've been asking for a number of years now the breakdown of how that treaty money was spent. Like where was it spent? Like that 9 million or whatever. What was it spent on? And like what was? We every time we asked for it, we never got it. They just showed us a lump. This is what you borrowed. That's what you owe, and that's it. But not how it was spent and how much went to this, how much went to that. As far as I figure out, we just made two guys a millionaires, and nothing was really done properly. We should have had that survey first to see where we want to go instead of doing it now. I think the band's trying to address that, but where did that all that money go? Like, I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of stealing, but I mean, I'd like to know where that money was spent. What we 300,000 on a consultant, 200,000 on a lawyer, so forth, such stuff. I know that we got really good staff working out of it. That helped us out. But I mean, I still like to know what happened to that. Most of that money, we didn't spend 9 million on Honey's portfolio or, the fisheries portfolio. I'd like to know where that money went. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Who would like to respond? Chief Deborah Hanous.
In each year's audited financial statement, there's a breakdown. So in this year's audited financial statement, the amount spent on treaty is shown at page 125. So if you went back to last year's audit, look in the index, and it would say for each year how much was spent. It doesn't offer perhaps the level of detail that you want, but it breaks it down by consultant fees, equipment, legal and professional services, materials and supplies, meeting costs, negotiation and other costs, office expenses, office services, rent, telephone, travel, wages, and benefits. So it would be a matter of gathering the audited financial statements for that 20-year period and then having a look at each of the schedules. It might not have the level of detail that you want because it doesn't say what consultants or what type of work was done or who was paid, and that's far too much detail for an audited financial statement.
Thank you. We do have a question online. Do you have a comment towards this question?
Sort of. Yeah.
Okay.
Just related to the treaty, so the treaty program, as Deborah pointed out, is on page 125 of the audited statements, which shows the details of the revenues and the expenses. And it shows a deficit for the treaty for the year, accumulated deficit to the end of 2015 of just over $9.1 million. So I always compare that to the long-term debt figure of the repayable funding that was received. And so if we look at the long-term debt note again, it shows that the repayable funding was just under $9.1 million. So although it shows a $9.1 million deficit there, the real deficit is about $30,000, or roughly a little under $30,000, because the repayable funding is not considered revenue, and so it shows up in deficit.
Thank you. And we have an online question asking, is there a copy of the business statements discussed this morning, and will there be copies of these statements available to, I guess, to off reserve?
We have one, I don't think we want to put confidential financial statements on our webpage for the entire world to see. We have a Namgis Facebook page, which is for Namgis members only. So if anybody out there outside of this community has access to the internet, they can apply to join Namgis Facebook page, and those documents are loaded on the Namgis Facebook page. And if you specifically want copies, then contact Vicky Brochi at our office and request those, and we'll mail those out to you.
Thank you for that. And Bert, please take the floor.
I'm just wondering, with the AIP vote a year or two ago, how does that affect what's happening with the treaty process and this particular loan that we're...
Last year, we took loan monies because we hadn't yet made a decision about what we were going to do about our participation in the treaty process. We don't have a mandate because of the no vote, and so we're not in a position to continue to take loan monies. But last year, there were already existing commitments and obligations to pay staff salaries, to pay consultants who had been engaged to do work throughout that fiscal year. So last year, we took loan monies. This year, we are taking no loan monies. This year, we arranged with the BC Treaty Commission to take contribution monies only. Contribution monies are not repayable, and so our intention is not to seek any further loan monies until there's a mandate from the people. So the benefit of being in the treaty process is there are contribution monies available to help us do important work in the community, but that will not result in any further debt on the nation. So you can look to next year's financial statement, and that amount of $9 million won't move. It's only contribution monies that have been received this year.
And do you have more presentation? No. Okay. Are there any other... Is it pertaining specifically to this presentation? Okay. George?
Hello. Okay, if we rejected the AIP, not really the treaty, because it was a bum AIP. There was nothing in there except giving everything up. So if we pull out of that thing, that means you would have to pay the $9 million back, right? If we rejected the treaty process right now, we'd have to pay that $9 million that none of us really agreed to. Like there's only a certain amount of people every year went to meetings. The majority of the members didn't agree to it. My whole point is that I've heard from a number of different guys. I never got involved in the treaty till late in the process, after everything was pretty well already done. That 80% of the stuff that was on the table in the beginning was taken off, fish being one of them. And I think we got away out on that $9 million because it wasn't good faith negotiations on behalf of both governments. I mean, we inherited a mess and we're trying to address it now. And I think that should be explained, that we rejected the AIP because there was nothing in it. It was basically giving everything up for nothing. Like we sounded great, 5%. We gave up 95% at AIP. We never got nothing out of it. It was the court case that said we own everything. Thank God for the Chilcotins. Now, my point is that how would we get rid of that $9 million debt by saying, well, listen, you guys didn't negotiate fairly? Why would we negotiate with a bunch of crooks, is basically what I'm saying about the government, because they took a lot of stuff off the table and basically left us with
The nation has signed on the dotted line. We've signed loan agreements year after year, and we're liable to repay those loans. Now, whether the government will demand the repayment remains to be seen. There are other First Nations who are no longer active in the treaty process, but to my knowledge, no one has actually formally withdrawn. And I think they're not formally withdrawing because that would trigger loan repayment obligations. And so no one wants to test the dragon, if you want to put it that way. You know, if you withdraw, is the government going to make you repay? So that's the issue and that's the challenge. But, you know, no one has been asked by the Government of Canada to repay when they've not been active in the treaty process, but then no one's formally withdrawn either to really test the government's resolve as to whether they would enforce it or not. So for the present time and for the foreseeable future, that money will stay on our books as a liability to the nation. And at some point, the piper may call it home, or at some point, we may try to negotiate our way out of it. Now is probably not the time. But this is an issue that actually is on the table. There's a multilateral engagement process that has just been initiated by the federal government, the provincial government, and the First Nations Summit. And one of the issues on the table as part of that is loan repayments. So it's on everybody's radar. It's something the parties are trying to address, but we're not there yet. So we hope to reap some of the benefits of that process, but there have been multiple processes over the years to address that very issue. So maybe this one will be the Midas touch that will get us there. Gilakasla.
Thank you. And are there any other comments or questions before we move on with Corey's presentation? Okay, Corey, the floor is yours.
Okay, just sort of as an addendum to the financial statements, I've got a few charts and graphs here just to visually show some of the comparisons 2015 to 2014. So this one is the comparison of expenditures, and it shows again the main department headings in a comparison of the expenditures for 2015 being in the blue color and the 2014 being in the red color. So you can see capital, of course, quite a bit higher expenditure than it was in 2014, but again, largely funded by funding or contributions. This just shows a breakdown, a little bit of a visual breakdown of where the 2015 expenditures were concentrated. Health making up about 19%. I think that's administration, 20%. I think that is natural resources at 13%. This is a comparison of the revenues 2015 to 2014. So again, 2015 is in the blue color and 2014 is in the red or purple type color. And of course the commercial enterprise is showing negative revenue because of the share of losses from the various business operations. And capital here, you can see the change in capital, very similar to the change that we saw in the expenditures for capital. The breakdown of the revenue also in a pie chart, similar to the breakdown of expenditures. And as we saw in the financial statements themselves, most of the major departments either showing a bit of a surplus or close to break even. This is just a visual comparing the revenue and expenses for the year 2015. The revenues are in the blue color and the expenses next to them. So any This Child and Family Services, you can see slightly higher in the expenditure side. And treaty, of course, quite a bit higher in the expenditure side, but again, covered off by the loan funding. And then lastly is just a bit of a comparison of the deficits between the 2 years. So although each year shows a deficit, a large deficit, this year 1.2 million, previous year about 1.9 million, if we take out some of the unusual things or things that are not really cash, the first one being the net losses from the enterprises. So that's not really a loss for the nation, but the accounting rules state we have to recognize the share of loss from the business enterprises. And so if we add that back, the treaty deficit that is funded by a loan, because again, as I say, that's not really a deficit. The amortization figure, which is not a cash expense, that's just recognizing depreciation of the assets over time. And then monies that are contributed to the business enterprises, adding those back, we get a adjusted figure of a surplus of about 2.7 million, and the previous year it was a little under 2.4 million. So a considerable difference between that deficit number and what the adjusted surplus would look like, and also showing the improvement from 2014 to 2015. Okay, so if anybody has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And this presentation also was provided to the administration, so if anybody wants a copy of that, I'm sure it's available. Oh, they're already here, okay.
Chief George, please come take the floor. Just going to record myself saying that.
I didn't think we were that close to the end of this part of it. Okay, I'd like to know about the specific claims you had on there. Were in debt on that? I was involved with those specific claims, and we had quite an elders council that guided us on the specific claims and told us what to do and where to go, and we got the group together and do that. But as far as I'm concerned, it was all completed. I mean, we never finished negotiating it, but how could we have a debt when all the legal opinions are done, the research was done, so forth? How do we accumulate debt on specific claims? Well, as a matter of fact, I don't think we ever negotiated all of them yet, and I'd like to know. I kept asking us in our treaty caucus, this is not the place. Well, I never knew when the right place was to question that, but I don't see how we could have a debt and specific claim. We got money. We used to have to put in a budget every year to get money to do research and legal opinions and all that stuff. The other one is that hospital site. Now, did you say we have a debt in the hospital site too?
Did you respond
or am I mistaken?
I think he's referring to something from Deborah's presentation.
Are you referring to this presentation or Deborah's previous presentation?
Well, I thought it was all one and the same. This is financial stuff, right? Well, then I'm not sure then. Maybe I'm mixed up here. But when we settled that land, that thing with the Synod property, that was done in 84, 85. We settled with them. They said, okay, you're going to get all this land back from the. It took 20 years before they signed it over to us. But the Columbia Coast Mission when the lease was expired in 1997. And they said, we're going to have to tear your hospital down. This is what Mulroney's government told us when we were negotiating with them. They said, we're going to have to tear it down. We said, no, we need a hospital there, but you don't tear it down. Oh, good. Well, okay, we'll build you a new hospital site. So that's why we got that hospital down here. But they were supposed to pay for all costs of cleaning up that thing because it was none of ours. The government leased it and leased it to the Columbia Coast Mission. So the Columbia Coast Mission and government should pay for the cleanup of that site. I don't see how it would fall on our band. I don't know if... I thought you said there was a debt in the hospital, the nurses station and all that stuff. That's why I asked that question. But specific
Okay.
claims is one I confused me how we got debt on there.
Okay, I'm not sure who would be best to respond. I think that's from a previous Deborah.
The accumulated deficit in specific claims is reported on page 48 in this year's audited financial statements. And you'll see that there was a deficit at the beginning of the 2015 fiscal year of $359,943, which was carried forward from previous years. At this point, I have no idea what that amount results from. So someone would need to go back over previous year's statements to review that. So not in a position to answer that at this time. And there is not, to my knowledge, a debt in respect of the St. George's lands. What I did say in my presentation is we have no capital reserve to do any repairs to that building, to the roof, et cetera, and that if we wanted to do anything to that roof, we have no monies to draw on, except our business profit monies is one potential source.
Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, yes, please. Yes, did everybody hear that, or would you like her to come? Do you want me to bring the mic?
So this part here? Okay. So it's just a way of digging a little deeper into the deficit figure and seeing where it comes from. And so a big contributing factor to the deficit figure is this share of net loss from the enterprises. So that's not, that loss is reflected in the Kutera, Otley, Orca Sand and Gravel financial statements. But the accounting rules state we have to also reflect it here. That's not a cash expense. The nation didn't have to pay anything for that. It just means that your investment has decreased by that value because of the loss from the business enterprise. So in order just to draw some comparisons from one year to the next, because those deficits are sort of buried in this number, I've added them back to try and arrive at something that is more like apples to apples to compare. So if we look at 2014, you see the net loss from the other enterprises was not as great, but the deficit was higher. This year, the deficit is lower, and there's a lot more contributing. In fact, all of that deficit can really be attributable from the other business enterprises, not so much from administration and running the programs within the nation. The other one is the treaty deficit. And as I mentioned earlier, with the way the treaty funding works is that you get this funding and you're expected to spend all of the funding, but 80% of it doesn't go into revenue. So it ends up creating a deficit because you're only showing 20% of the revenue, but 100% of the expenses. So that has contributed to some of that deficit. So if we look at the loan monies that helped pay for those expenditures and we add those back, that helps explain some of that deficit. And then the last two are just the amortization is not a cash expense. Capital assets are paid for when you buy them, and the amortization is just reflecting the wear and tear or depreciation of that asset. So I've just added that back. Again, just to try and draw a comparison, you can see the previous year the depreciation was a lot higher, or about $100,000 higher. That helped contribute to the higher deficit there. It's really just a way to try and compare the 2 years' deficits and getting out some of these things that have really contributed to those deficits. So even though we see about almost a $700,000 difference here, it's about $350,000 once we take out the unusual items, I guess. Does it help?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you, Corey, for your presentation. Any other comments or questions from the floor? Nope. Okay, everybody, if I could ask you to get back to your seats. We've got 2 more presentations, and we have to approve the meeting minutes from last November as well. Okay, we're going to get started again. This meeting was supposed to end by 4 o'clock. It's 20 to 4 now. You've got 2 more presentations. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from last November 1st, 2014. Thank you, Ethel. And we have a second from Yvonne. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to community vision and oh, sorry. First, second, and a vote. Oh, sorry, all those in favor? Again, Ethel? Aye. This is for the meeting minutes from last year, November 1st, 2014. And anybody opposed? You opposed? No. Okay. So 4, and anybody opposed? No. Thank you. So the meeting minutes are passed. Okay, so now we are going to community vision, rights, and title strategy. And if we could get, please, Nicole McClelland to come forward. There you are. There we go. Oh, I get my water.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole McClelland, and I'm going to try not to wreck the place. Oops. Did you need this down? Maybe, yeah. Is that high enough? Or do you want to You're just too tall for this organization. I know. No, not yet. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to give this presentation this afternoon.
My presentation is on community engagement. As some of you know, at the last general meeting, we committed to launching more engagement with the community to try and go back to grassroots and determine what members feel about the vision for the nation. So this report is reporting on that engagement process. We did our main tool was we did a survey. It was launched on July 31st and it closed on September the 18th. And our goal was to try and better understand members' concerns and priorities around governance. The survey was distributed in print and online. We mailed copies to members, and copies were made available at the band and the village office. We had 3 mass email campaigns containing the online copy, and we also put it out on social media. Oops. Oops. Can you help me, Clyde? Sorry, I seem to be pushing the wrong button here. Here we go. Okay. So first of all, about the respondents, those are the members that completed the survey. You can see that we had a high representation of middle-aged members who responded, and the average age of the respondent was 45 years old. Elders and youth were moderately underrepresented in the sample, which is consistent with the 2014 community profile, which I think has been handed out, which shows that your current population has a higher number of middle-aged members. And also the underrepresentation of youth members is a common trend in any public opinion poll, so that's not really a unique finding for Namgis. And again, about the respondents, you can see that the lack of youth representation is shown. Only 8.5% of the respondents were under 25 years of age. And we also were able to determine that of the youth that responded, 30% resided in Alert Bay and 70% of the youth who responded resided outside of Alert Bay. And we focused a little bit on understanding how the youth responded to the survey, because it has been brought up by council, and also the membership is a really critical segment of your population to communicate with. So we're trying to learn how to do that better. Another comment about the respondents is we asked everybody if they lived in Alert Bay or not, and we had an equal number of people participate in the survey living in Alert Bay and outside of Alert Bay. So that gave us a good basis to compare how members in Alert Bay answered versus how members outside of Alert Bay answered some questions. So the findings of the survey, the majority of members were, when asked the question, how should Namgis be involved in decision-making about our territory, the majority of members said that they believe that decisions about the territory should be made by the Namgis government and by extension by the Namgis people. So they chose that decisions should be made by Namgis, 62%, whereas 22% said that decisions should be shared between the Namgis and other governments, and 6% said that they didn't know. And if you put that together with the comparison of the members who responded from outside of Alert Bay and the members who responded inside Alert Bay, you can see that the results broken down by age and location didn't show any subtrends, which means that members, whether they lived outside of Alert Bay or not, and in all age groups, responded generally the same to this question. So it's a confident and unified response from the members, which provide a clear message to leadership to work toward building decision-making capacity. But as we go on to the results of the next question, although the high-level direction to self-govern exists, we'll see that some low-level mechanics of governance need to be addressed. And that takes us to the next question, which is, in your opinion, is Namgis ready for self-government? And as you can see there, that majority of members indicated that they did not think that Namgis was ready for self-government. 15% said that they were, and 32% said that they didn't know. So contrasting with the results of the previous question, which indicates that Namgis leadership should proceed as a self-governing nation, the response to this question complicates that direction. And this suggests that a high-level goal it must be worked towards in terms of self-governance, but it can't be achieved until some of the lower-level mechanics of self-governance are better developed by the nation. And also, we received many comments in the survey and through the video which reflect the need also to improve readiness for self-governance, with a strong emphasis on reducing internal conflict within the nation, and also a willingness to compromise on individual interests in order to come together as one. Unlike also the previous question, when we looked at the breakdown in terms of the responses from members living in Alert Bay versus members outside of Alert Bay, and responses within the different age categories, we did see some differences. And more than 62% of members living in Alert Bay versus 44% of members living outside of Alert Bay believe that Namgis is not ready for self-governance. So it was the members in Alert Bay who were more troubled by the idea of Namgis self-governance, or feeling that Namgis was ready for it. And members living outside of Alert Bay also more frequently responded, "I don't know," to the question, 40% versus 23% of the members living in Alert Bay. And this suggests that the greater degree of decisive responses made by members living in Alert Bay is likely a result of the fact that they are more closer to and more aware of current governance practices than those who aren't living in Alert Bay, and they have more experience to inform their decision. And the findings are consistent with the responses that were generated in the comments section of the survey. And of the 10 comment categories, the most commonly referenced theme of members' comments was building trust and dialogue between leadership and members, with 23 out of 86 comments falling into this category. So building trust really came through as a really important concern or objective of members. And then members want a blend of modern and traditional governance. Members were asked, what does Namgis' future of self-government look like to you? And a majority, 62% of the survey respondents selected that they would like to see a blend of the Namgis traditional system and an elected system. And this appears to align well with the large number of comments that came with the survey, stressing the importance of an accountable, merit-oriented government made up of the best people for the job. And at the same time, the importance of incorporating traditional Namgis cultural protocol and process was also stressed in the comments. And instead of being bound to an imposed colonial form of governance or using an outdated system that's not well suited for some contemporary challenges, a blended system would ideally take strengths from both the traditional and elected forms of governance. And moving on, most of the members residing outside of Alert Bay, when asked in the survey, indicated that they would like to return to the area, that's Alert Bay and the surrounding territory, if they had the opportunity. And similarly, members were asked to prioritize how they felt about the territory, and you can see that a place for future Namgis generations to live and work was given the highest priority in terms of how members were thinking about the territory. And adding weight, and then you can see that it's a place that is special, vast economic potential to gather food and medicines, and a place with environmental values all came after that. And then adding weight to these responses are comments that we had a lot of comments come in about housing. And it supports this finding that quality and quantity of housing for members living outside of Alert Bay would enable people to come home, and longer-term employment to allow members to pay for their homes and work where they live, and access to other quality of life components such as healthcare and education to make it easier for someone to come home and live on reserve or in the territory, and a desire to get away from revolving housing. So we just saw that the prevalence of comments about housing supported the idea that members would really like to be able to live here. Namgis are a people of the sea and the forest. So members were asked which of the natural resources are most important to you, and it was a very uniform result, and the top 3 natural resources that were selected by members were overwhelmingly fish, water, and forests. The results show a clear trend with approximately 80% of members identifying those 3 things, fish, water, and forests, as the most important resources. Wildlife came in at 31%, minerals 10%, and other was 4%. And this reflects the importance of Namgis members that they place in the traditional economy, culture, and way of life, and they serve as a useful indicator to leadership of what to prioritize during decision-making and visioning. And then members want a prosperous, sustainable future. They were asked to select their top 3 priorities as a nation, and they shared a diverse range of priorities. 71% listed creating jobs and work opportunities. Protecting our lands and resources came as a second at 63%, and better education was the third top priority at 54%. Interestingly, the lowest priority statement was strengthening our governance, and in spite of the fact that 53% of your members responded no to the question, is Namgis ready for self-government? They still selected strengthening governance as a lower priority here. And we are learning a lot about designing surveys and asking questions and how to communicate. So we think that perhaps we could improve this question a little bit. But it also shows perhaps that respondents are really focusing on what the immediate on-the-ground priorities are in the way that they answered that question. Namgis, going backwards. Members have a broad and even priorities. So this was one question where we asked members to prioritize some of their values, and what we found was that they all placed a higher priority on all of the values. So the response to this question wasn't really valuable in a statistical sense, but within the small range, 5%, I think, of the differing priorities, having a strong culture came out as being the top selected priority. And I think what this does indicate, because everybody selected all of these items as such a high priority, that it affirms sort of the broad and integrated priorities of the membership in these areas. As I said, there was many comments that came in with the survey, and what we did was we organized them into themes to see what themes were most important to members, and those are the themes there, and they're listed in priority. So building trust and dialogue between leadership and members was the highest occurring theme in members' comments, and then following that was housing, economy, youth engagement, off-reserve engagement, jobs and skills training, economy, strengthening cultural pride and unity, Namgis sovereignty, and education and health. So in conclusion, we worked with a company, a communications firm, to do this survey and to transfer some capacity into the nation so that we can continue to do this kind of work. So they did help with some of the analysis, and there's a more detailed report that's available for any of you who want to see the detailed findings, and you can have a look and see how you feel about them. But in conclusion, I think the themes that we really saw here was that members want unity and cohesion for Namgis. People are aware that there's internal conflict in the community and they want to work to find solutions. Members want a blend of traditional values and practices, and members value the Namgis territory as a special place and want to be able to live and thrive in the territory. We thank everybody who participated in the visioning process, who did the survey. We appreciate everybody who comes in and wants to find out more about what's going on. We hope to do more visioning and community engagement as we move forward. So keep an eye out and we'll try and reach everybody. And the final point is that we do have a photo vision contest. Unfortunately, we only got 4 entries. And we'd like to extend the deadline to November 30th. So if anybody has any submissions for our photo vision contest, check us out online or call the communications office or come and talk to me, and we'd love to receive your entries. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments from the floor regarding this presentation? Oh, okay. Please come.
Good feedback there. I'm taking a look at some of the things that you found. One, surprising that it's about a 50-50 between the off-reserve and on-reserve. What I thought it was about 900 off-reserve and about 700 on. But take a look at, one of the things we take a look at when we talk about the future, do you have any educated, when you talk about leaders and information and success, how do we do that? When you take a look at our voting and the different things that we have on reserve, I'm just wondering about, I don't know what's normal. Normal for on reserve and off reserve, and how do we live? How do the majority of the people on this island live in a daily life without any kind of work? The majority of the people that are working in Alert Bay are banned by the band staff. What do you call the band council, and all the different things here. When you talk about we're going to. I think when we were talking about treaty, for instance, we're going to have 100 jobs. We're going to have 500 jobs. You know what? You got to start speaking the truth to the people. And I'm not calling anybody down. I'm sharing this stuff. You take a look at where we are as a community. First of all, what kind of jobs have we got on this island? Fishing was one of the main things that we had here. Now you take away fishing and you talk about all these different jobs that we're going to start. We had the people in Alert Bay put together a thing called the NEDA proposal. It was a 7-year project, updated every year, and that was a successful program. And the guy that put that together is using it in India and other different places in the world, and it's been successful. But one of the things I see here over the last 10 years, we have all these different programs that we're working on. We go out and we ask the people, what do you want? Do you want to keep your culture? Is that one of the most important things? Those of you that are older and remember why we fought for a school in this community, so that we could one day have total immersion and utilize the elders that still spoke the language. And it's not there. We don't have that in the school. We teach English, First Nation, or Kwakwala, but it's only a small piece. And those things we talk about jobs. I don't know why, but in the past 20 years, we've been trying to fight for our people to live over in the Namgis River. The Namgis River, if you're going to talk about jobs, those hundreds of jobs and many jobs, is going to be when we can have a place, location, where people could live and drive to jobs. We haven't got that on this island. You've got to really take a look at that. And those are the things that I see. And we talk about culture. Culture, how important is culture? And how important in our school, how important on this island is culture. We have a very small part of people who are teaching our language. And how many in this room really can Kwakwala? No, Audrey, maybe Shirley and Lolly, Gloria, Sunny, or Kathy. Very small people, very small amount of people. But I would just like to see when this council and Hope and our different staff, when are you going to put a proposal together in this community that's going to be say a 5 or 10-year plan, updated every year, so we can see a success where we are. You can't make farmers out of us. The residential school tried that. And there was a letter from the Indian Affairs that said that we gave all the people in Alert Bay a sack of spuds for seed, and they ate them. That's the kind of farmers we are. So those are things I see. I know you want me to keep quiet, and that's the thing that I see, and I'm just wondering about when you take a look at your, and I'm not calling it down, I'm just saying what I'd like to see, and I think a lot of the other people, we talk about our ocean and freezer. What are we going to do about our ocean? We as a Namgis, we are so proud of our river and our territory. When are we going to take that to court? When somebody in Ottawa or Vancouver says no fishing today, tomorrow, no fishing tomorrow. I asked the council, I went to see Dixon and asked if the people could put me on that council meeting for 15 minutes. We should never stop fishing. We should have an emergency amount of fish that we should be able to get. I talked to the people on the table, got 2 fish, 1 fish. How many people have in the river? Listen now, we did this 5 years ago. We cut out fishing in this community so the fish could get up the river. You know what they did? They caught 250,000 sockeye in the Fraser River that we let through. And I tried to get to the council and ask them that we should have an emergency number of 10, 15, 20,000 out of what was going by. We could have caught it. And I know that you want me to sit down and you don't want to hear any more of this, but you're not from here. When we're going to live down on the garden path together and talk about our issues, somebody from out of town comes and tells us you said enough.
I'm here because I was invited here. I do try and respect you all as you are speaking, and I'm trying to respect the wishes of your fellow members to move things along and have things on time. But thank you. I do appreciate that I am from out of town. Nicole has a comment, and then Deborah, would you like to also respond to these comments, or Chief Deborah? So Nicole first.
I just wanted to comment on the observation about the division of the respondees out of town and in Alert Bay. And you're correct, that wasn't intended to show how your whole population was dispersed. It was just really intended to show where the people lived who answered the survey. So we were only really looking at the survey respondents in that breakdown. So you're right about those numbers.
I just want to say thank you for all of your input, and just to let you know, with Hopeton on board, we are working on a strategic plan. He's prepared a first draft for us, and I've made notes of some of the feedback you've provided about the importance of coming up with the plan around language and culture, looking at reestablishing a community on Vancouver Island, about not just moving our lips about jobs, but actually doing something about creating jobs. and about don't keep asking us the same questions over and over again because we've told you a million times, and about the need for a 5 to 10 year economic plan that can be used to measure progress. So these comments have all been taken, and we're going to bring them in and feed them into the work that we're doing, and hopefully by May when we come here, we're going to have what you're asking for.
Okay, thank you. And Art, did you want to comment as well? No, needs to be turned on.
Yeah. Is it on?
Yep.
There's a few things here that I want to address. You know, the thing that happens in the summertime when I was previously on council was that there was all the fishermen were up north and they were all on council, and there was nobody here to deal with in-season urgencies. And at that time, I asked for a contingency of council to be set up to deal with that, and I never got any response. So I have to take part of the problem for some of that stuff that happened, and but the rest of the council also has to do that too. And as far as the local jobs are concerned, we haven't really looked around for any solutions yet. And one of the solutions that was brought to my attention by our joint economic development person down at the village office there was that we have all the things in place to open up that fish plant. We got Kotera. We could start putting 20, 30 people to work processing fish and maybe speeding up the process of making money. And you know, that plant was only used for a little while for oysters, and then we found out from down island that the oysters grew flat, and the stuff that we were growing in Booker Lagoon was growing around the ropes like this, and we couldn't shuck them 30 a minute or whatever it took. So it got shut down because it wasn't profitable. And we never did a follow-up on that. And, you know, we were doing cucumbers, urchins, and clams in there, and it just fizzled out. So, you know, there's other spin-offs like processing halibut and year-round and cod and stuff like that. And, you know, none of these resources have been brought to our table by anybody. And, you know, I just started brainstorming just when Nicole was doing her presentation. And if we wanted to get some of those jobs, and I'm sure there's other spin-off jobs there, like, you know, we had 12 people go through Outward Bound training, and when we got those 5 beaches for kayaking, I mean, there could have been a bunch of people out there with their own kayak companies and stuff, and but you know, no response. I mentioned it all the time, no response. So you know, we've got to start taking everybody seriously if there's anything to be done, because you know, if we're going to just look at millions and millions of dollar corporations and then start losing money, we're not doing nothing for the people. We're not doing anything for them. And we have to look locally. We have to look at the people that are walking around in this room. How can we put you to work? What is your gift? What is your qualifications? Whatever it is. And I think the next survey should be done on that. And, you know, when you talk about our culture, I look around the room and there may be 6 or 7 of us that are fluent speakers, and 3 of them are my sisters and myself. But I've never been called to do anything with the language, and I don't know, it may be my last name. There's a lot of that going around town. And, you know, we're going to lose a valuable asset when I die, because I'm the only one on council that can speak Kwakwala. And, you know, if we don't start paying attention to the elders, like what Chris is saying, we're going to lose a lot of our a lot of the people that put up a fight for our people, and they don't get any credit. Kayla Kessler.
That's okay. Thank you. Yeah, Chief George, you have the floor.
This on? Oh, yeah. I kind of touched on that earlier. Like our plant, there's a plant in Quinault that's no bigger than our plant, and they make millions out of there every year. They run every kind of resource that goes through it. When I came back from there in the 80s, I said, let's go down there and look at what they're doing. They were going to come up and help us establish it. And basically what they sold their, fresh sockeye is fresh, right? But they had terminal fish like pinks, dogs, coals, and so forth. They processed it in little packages like Swanson TV dinners. And they made big money on that. You hardly sell those things anymore. We should have looked into that. It wasn't only that, but there was prawns there's crabs, like sort of what Arthur was talking about. And I don't know why we didn't look into it. We should have. It's not too late. We still can do it. Eventually something's going to happen. Another plan we had before, and people always get mad at me when I talk about before, but that across from our Gaver, there used to be a park there. All the kids used to go play there. Well, besides play some other things, but that we use that park for a lot of things. But Rob Royer, our band manager, who was one of the greatest band manager we ever had, he had a plan for a number of hot houses up there. I don't know what the hell you call those things. Greenhouses, yeah. And we were going to get money from the government, and from Hydro was going to give us a break on it so that we could get into it. But in a setting like this, somebody got up and said, we're farmers of the sea. We're not farmers of the forest. And people went, it sounds really good, but we missed out an opportunity. We could have our own vegetable stuff here now. I think we strayed from, like what Chris said, we got a plan, stick to it. Review it every now and then, see where you went wrong and what you could improve on. Not to say, that guy didn't know what he's talking about, throw it away and then start a new one. I mean, like I told Deb, it's like we're one-armed men in the water swimming around in circles because we go there and we throw that plan away, then we start over here and then we start going that way. And it's, I think that it's just a learning process, but we were the most innovative band in Canada, the Namgis at one time. And I see us going that way again. We stalled because of that stupid treaty. I mean, all our efforts went into that treaty and nothing went into developing our members and our people or our education. What part of that AIP and everything was dealing with education like Chris is talking about with our kids? Have we looked at our kids, see what their specialties are? Do they like playing building blocks? Well, they could be engineer. Clue in on that. Make sure they got all the best teachers in the world to do that. They could still learn math and English and all other stuff. Or somebody likes playing doctor, well, maybe they might be a nurse, build up on that. But it's there's a lack of vision sometimes when we get so far. But with the more advanced we get, the worse our problems are. For example, in housing, when I left council in 1994, there was $2 million in housing. I hear housing's a problem now. I was kind of wondering why. It's probably because fishing collapsed. The other thing is, and I've asked this in our last meeting we had, and they're going to look into it now, but what about that trade agreement that Harper just signed? That supersedes our Constitution in Canada. Now, how is that going to affect our people here when we're talking about rebuilding our wealth and our rights and all this stuff? You got to have vision. You got to kind of be able to look outside and to get that stuff going. I mean, we got probably the most educated council we've ever had. Well, let's use them. But you need a combination of people really educated and people with common sense, I guess, best way to say it, like how to do stuff. I mean, like Chris is saying, our language is the most important thing. If all the Chinese people in North America forgot how to speak Chinese, they could always go back to China and learn how to speak Chinese again. If all the Germans forgot how to speak German, they can go to Germany and learn how to speak German. But once people like Arthur, Chris and them die, there's no more language. Now, that should be a priority for us. I mean, my mom complained about this for years. She taught that school for 40 years, that there wasn't enough backup for the education for the cultural program. You can't teach somebody 50 minutes in class and then expect them to learn the language. There should be more of a priority on that cultural part of that school. Why should we have our own school if it's just going to be a copy of that school up there? we could make both schools together and go to grade 12. I think that our school is a special school and that more of that stuff should be stressed in there. And I know that first Blythe, when he was our principal, we were looking in how to do that kind of stuff that we're talking about here, to put it in our curriculum in school. I mean, with Trudeau talking about money for education, well, look into it. How, get this stuff going. The other thing about the
Just so you
before
know,
I
your
forget the breakwater,
5
listen,
minutes is up,
it
so
doesn't matter
1
the
minute.
breakwater. Okay, I see the poster up. It's going to cost $12 million to redo that breakwater. 10 years ago, Eddie Mack, Frank Joseph, myself fixed that whole breakwater. It took us less than a month. We just re-nailed it. We milled whatever needed to be fixed. There was no $12 million there. And when those guys blow up, making roads in the Namgis Valley, there's big rocks everywhere in there. How come we don't tell a log company, bring us those rocks over, we'll make our own breakwater? I mean, or are we too scared to say something like that? I think that it's time that we got tough with people and say, listen, that's our rocks, our land. If you're going to exploit our resources, at least give us some of the bits of the rocks so we can make our own breakwater. But I mean, it seems like we're like this now. We need deprogramming dollars because we're so programmed. These white men better than us. That we don't give our own people credit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, please come take the floor.
Something really bothered me about this fishery business. Last week or whatever, we only had a 10-hour opening for our men and women who all go out there and make a living. That was predicted by our council back in the late 70s and 80s when they were meeting with a fisheries representative. And they were arguing back and forth on the table, around the table. They came right here to Alert Bay. Back then, they told us we were getting 4 days, 5 days a week. And but they said the fish were dwindling. A series of things happened. They gave licenses out to boats. Whoever owned the boat can get a fishing license. And then pollution of our oceans. Then they continued after that. They started blaming the fishermen catching too much fish. First Nations people know how to handle that situation. They governed us all the way from Ottawa or wherever they had fisheries. They told us when you could go out fishing and when you couldn't. We got less and less days as the time went by. But still, every year the fisheries told us how much fish was coming in. They didn't know. They didn't have a clue. Then our fishermen started getting cut down. That was the decline of the fishing industry because government couldn't control, couldn't manage. And still they blamed the fishermen for taking too much. They predicted that it would go down to the days will be cut down for the men to go out there and make a living during the salmon season. And they started opening up the fishery for a day. Every time they opened the fishing industry for the fishermen, the tides weren't right. Our fishermen were retired our fishermen are still after our salmon, are not fishing, sitting on the board with the fisheries and helping manage it when they should open it. I don't know why the fisheries are in control of that, when they should be sitting down with our local government and then saying when can we open, what days. I don't think they even know what a tide book looks like. Or have our fishermen who are still out there and past fishermen who no longer have boats, they knew when the fish was going to be going through our waters. The fisheries never contacted our men to ask them what's a good time to fish. They opened it up at the wrong time and our fishermen couldn't go out. The last 10 hours, they predicted it to come down to hours. 10 hours in 1 year? How are they supposed to make a living? They have to travel all the way up and down the coast, leave here in June, come back in late August, away from our own fishing grounds. Where has it gone? The whole series of things why the fishery got taken our livelihood away from us. One of them was the fish farm industry was moved in here. But yet, they're still telling us what to do without consulting us to come up and help them arrange for our men to make a good living. They're not doing that. They're telling us, and that's wrong. We have a whole nation of smart men up there. We'll be sitting down with the fisheries in their office or make them come here and talk to us. Why are they controlling us from far away? Why are our men making a good living? 10 hours. 10 hours was predicted by our council in the 80s that it would come down to hours, not days. When the big run came through, they didn't let us know till close to the time it was time to go fishing. And still, they did not give the men enough time to make a good living. That's wrong. They should let us, our council know so they can set something down beside them. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, one more. Yes, please come take the floor.
My name's Juicy.
Oh, hi, Juicy. Sorry. Juicy, you have the floor.
Yeah, I agree with what Chris was saying earlier, because I seen on the news about all that fish that go by. I watched one day on the news about 3-4 years ago. The fisheries didn't count on that Fraser going down near the river. Both sides of the bank was littered with all dead sockeye. And on the news, they said that's what the government was trying to cover up. They were hoping that river didn't go down, but it did. And it showed all that fish. You know, that's no good that we just let our fish go through. We should just keep fishing. We shouldn't just stop. I try to tell a couple of our councillors, go out and fish. I even told my skipper, let's go fish. He said, no, I don't want to go jail. I said, you're not going to go jail. You start something, somebody else is going to come and join you. So we'll have everybody out there. But no, he wouldn't. And everybody just tie up, and where's all that fish that's going by? Could have been our winter money for the people, but no, here we are tied up. And the other thing that bugging me too is these fish farms. The time we went to protest, I told my skipper, put me on that float, I'll go start cutting the lines. Because, you know, we're not going to get nowhere paddling around a fish farm singing songs. You're not going to get nowhere. Them people were actually clapping their hands. They were just thanking us for singing songs. You don't do that. You go out there and you're going to cut them loose, you cut them loose, pull them out of there. But no, nobody done that. And my friend, just up in Sergeant Pasture, he told me that there's old painting on that where that fish farm is. It shouldn't be there. It's right up against the bluff, that fish farm, and there's old painting on that wall. That farm shouldn't be there at all. It's right in the reserve. There's 2 farms there, and we got 2 rivers right there, Bonson and Thompson. Those farms should be kicked out of there. It's not just ruining our halibut there either, our red snappers. It's screwing up our prawns too, eh? We had a lot of prawns in it, but we never got very much when we tried. So we have to do something instead of just singing songs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yvonne, please come and take the floor.
Great work, Nicole. Really good information. Thank you. This is left for interpretation, though. When we say that fishing is a priority, are we talking about saving the salmon that's left in the ocean or overfishing the salmon? Because I'm hearing a lot of fishing talk. Is that better? Okay, so I said this is left to a lot of it's open for interpretation. The fishing really frightens me because I don't want the Pacific coast to end up like the Atlantic coast from overfishing. We're caretakers, and we really need to be serious about that role. I also was looking at the numbers, and the highest population of the Namgis people are between 50 and 54. And then the second is 20 to 29, which is my children's age. So when we're looking to the future, we need to be really mindful of the big age gaps of the population. And when we're addressing the fishing, the water, and all these resources, in these surveys, getting those young people involved, because I've noticed that it's been a challenge. And I feel, in talking to some of the young parents, that they feel their voice isn't being heard. So how do we make them feel validated and go about validating what they have to say has substance? Because they are the mothers and fathers of our future. And we really need to support them in developing a strong voice. So again, great work. I think we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and keep up with the good stuff, and maybe take down the opportunity left for interpretation and being a little bit more direct with our surveys so we get the answers and the directions that we need, and getting the involvement of our young people, I think would be a lot more helpful. But again, a great document. Thank you for your time and your energy that went into this, Nicole. Great work.
Thank you for your comments, Yvonne, and thank you, Nicole.